Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode, we will cover the first week of May 2022, after which we will also give our thoughts on to whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Humanity Has Declined, or Jinyuri wa Sitai Shimashita. Totally butchered that, but it's okay. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automobile mechanic, and with me, as always, is my co-host Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. English language sensei. I cannot speak today. Now, Jay, I just want to say I feel a little hurt because you had tricked me into watching Doctor Strange without you, and I thought we were going to be able to talk about it today, but it seems like we can only talk about Moon Knight right now.
Yes, I'm the bad guy. Yes. Yeah, it was very interesting because of how movies are released, I guess, internationally away from the American audiences. Like, I get basically a full day before, anyone on the American side gets to see their movies. So technically, like, your Thursday morning, you could have woken up with a spoiler like, oh my gosh, Doctor Strange kills the whole Marvel universe or something like that. But yeah.
I'm glad you didn't do that.
Yeah, exactly. But I did send you a photo because, like, the posters here, like, the marketing in foreign countries are so neat because they do, like, special, sometimes graphic designs to match the culture that they're in. Like, China does that, or Disney does that very highly when they send movies to China. But yeah, I wanted to grab posters because they were going fast. And even at the midnight showing here, almost every theater for the 5 showings that they were doing at midnight were all sold out. So I did not get a chance to watch it before we got to talk about it.
So they sell the posters over there. They don't give it to you for free? Or
well, I got a
do you
special
have
deal.
to have
I
a
am
special
a
deal?
special days because I just know a guy.
Okay. Because I know, at least like over here in the States, as long as you ask for it, you can get it. I think with some theaters, you have to at least show your purchase of a ticket, or you have to wait until the movie is finished. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of jelly because the theater that I went to, they had this special box that you can get. It looks like the magic box that Strange had to contain the Spider-Man spell that he had in No Way Home. Essentially, it was maybe about 6 feet in all quadrants. I'm sorry, not feet, but 6 inches. It was a pretty big box, and you can fill it up with popcorn. The thing is, it was refillable. So if you bought it that same day and you come back later on, you can get it filled up with popcorn for free. And the place that I went to, it didn't have any of them in stock. They had sold out at the morning showing, and they only had 25 of them, which is completely dumb because with a movie as big as this or as hyped as this, you would think that you would have more merchandise to try to push and try to sell. I guess it's sort of hard to tell when a movie is going to be popular, but this is the way that Doctor Strange has been done and how people have felt about it. It's like you know better. You should know better. But enough about Doctor Strange. We can give our thoughts on Moon Knight a little bit, and we're just dwelling on the comic book scene just a little bit because at least here in the States today is Free Comic Book Day. I just wanted to give that little PSA announcement to anybody who's not familiar with it. Basically, you could go to your local comic book store, or you can go to your local bookstore like Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Second and Charles, and you can get a free comic book. And some places do free things throughout the entire month of May. So it's definitely, I've enjoyed my time going to enjoying Free Comic Book Day. And now that I think about it, Jay, do they have anything equivalent to that in Mongolia? I don't even think you told me that they would even have like Comic Cons over there.
Yeah, the Comic Con or convention scene is kind of limited here. It happens usually once a year, and feels very much like the third rated hotel kind of gathering that's kind of sketchy. It's like, oh, everyone's putting their costume together for the first time and like kind of indulging in that kind of community for the first time. So it's still in its baby infancy stage right now. But yeah, no comic book day. Comic books, graphic novels aren't really published in Mongolian, so it's very hard for like the casual citizens to kind of celebrate the medium that way. But it's so nice that Comic Book Day does kind of happen around the same time as like Star Wars Day and Revenge of the Fifth and Sixth, because a lot of the times the Comic Book Day kind of aligns with the release of Star Wars comics. And previously, we talked about like the Princess Leia comics, the Darth Vader comics, and like what Disney has been doing with the property, which I love. Yeah, especially with the comic book scene as is, can't really say that it's like a beloved medium here or even can be appreciated, because I can't really find any comic book here at all or graphic novels. But yeah, I'm very much in the camp of like, oh yeah, Moon Knight. That's what I was getting to. Like, it's like, oh, after watching Moon Knight, I'm kind of invested in that character now, because like we all seen the memes of like, is it like random bullshit go? It's kind of the meme for Moon Knight, and then like things he said to like Joker and Dracula is like these different kind of scenarios with them.
Yeah, it's like how Dracula owes him money, and he's always trying to shirk Moon Knight. It's hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like a really funny scene between him and Spider-Man where he's switching. Oh, sorry, I don't want to spoil that. But anyways, but yeah, for the 6 episodes miniseries, I very much felt very satisfied with not seeing any more of Moon Knight, which is an odd thing to say for how much I love the series. But how the story wraps up is very satisfying for Mark or Oscar Isaac's Moon Knight, and just kind of very gratifying, I guess, because there's something teased out through all 3 or all 6 episodes that really pays off pretty well for how little it's shown and for how much of a small moment it is. But it's like you get so endeared with his characteristics of his person, or of who's his main person. Stephen Grant.
Yeah, the one we follow is Steven for the most part, yeah.
Right, exactly. So like his character of Stephen Grant is so well like built that you feel very endeared to him, even from when you start revealing his backstory and his hopes and dreams and how traumatized he is truly. And even they go into like a little bit of parallels between Legion and deals with like the mental landscape of the character.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm completely satisfied. Don't know if I'll go back to WandaVision. I don't know if I'll go back to Winter Soldier, but I'm glad that I put the hours in for Moon Knight. But how about you, Sam, as the more obsessive comic book fan?
I would say with Moon Knight, very, very much like you said, it was a good story for a character. I would say the thing that made me as I'm trying to think. The thing that made me react at the beginning is because we are so conditioned, at least with these works, we are so conditioned for everything to be tied together. And when you look at Moon Knight, you can basically watch it as a standalone thing within the Marvel franchise or within the Marvel universe. They don't necessarily refer or mention any of the events that happen. I guess because it's very international, so you don't, because it is an international story, you don't necessarily have to hear about the invasion in New York, but there are other things that happen that make you question, like, oh, why isn't this talked about or anything else like that? And in that case, with me wanting it to be connected, I was left wanting, or even at the end, it can end as it is, right? But because of that previous conditioning, it's like, I want more. I want to see how he fits in. I want, more resolution. But as you said, with the way that the story and the arc is done in a good and satisfying way, where if you wanted to end it at this first season, you definitely can. It was so fun. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad that you made the Legion comparison. I've mentioned Legion several times, and I kept forgetting to talk about it on the show. But the way that I've described Moon Knight as Legion Light, in the sense that in how it deals with personality disorder. So if you can take the scenes where Mark was in the psychiatric ward, if you can take a full season of scenes like that where you're just totally discombobulated, then I would say that Legion is for you. And it was just very, very good. And I would suggest that you would go and see some of the other Marvel shows, because as much work as they put into Moon Knight, they did just amounts similar, if not, yeah, about the same amount of work in all the other shows as well. They were very, very fun, and it has been a good ride with Marvel and its TV shows so far. So that's all that I really have in regards to comic booky stuff. Did you have any other thoughts, or should we talk about Japanese anime and manga now?
Just a final thought, because the only moment I was really, I guess, into my nerdness about the series was that when they go to Cairo, which again, Moon Knight is very upfront about its heritage with the Egyptian pantheon of gods. I was like, is this how they're going to introduce Apocalypse into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Because
Oh,
it's
yes.
so odd how close some of the X-Men stuff, even with Juggernaut, like one of the versions of Juggernaut is actually related to like mythology inside of Egypt. So I was like, is one of the gods that they show like quote unquote in prison going to be Apocalypse, and then they're going to break all the gods out, and that's going to again transition into Thor: Love and Thunder with the villain called God Slayer or
Goro.
Butcher God. Yeah, the God Butcher. And I was like,
Gore.
if they do that, they are really going hard in the paint of connecting these TV shows and movies together. But that's my final thought.
It sounds like you just want Oscar Isaac Inception, because he was the one that
That's
portrayed
exactly
Apocalypse.
why. That's exactly why I was like, oh
Oscar
wow.
Isaac meeting Oscar Isaac fighting against Oscar Isaac.
Yeah, because not Dave Filoni, but Kevin Feige fits me as the kind of guy that would like wink at the audience like that. We know you hated that Apocalypse, so.
Oh my goodness. But yes, and I guess with that we can go on to the news that we have. And the first bit of news, it's a quick little one, where we have learned earlier this week that for Vinland Saga Season 2, they will be moving studios. Instead of staying with Studio Wit, which did their first season, they will be going with Studio Mappa. Now, Jay, what are your thoughts on that? With Vinland going from Studio Wit to Studio Mappa.
Yeah, this story kind of blew my mind this week because of how I think it's really easy to forget that not Mappa, sorry, but Studio Wit is celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year. And like how many properties that we don't really credit them to because they're so good that the studio doesn't really speak for itself. So obviously, we know about Attack on Titan because that's how they opened up 10 years ago in 2013 with Attack on Titan. It has been handling it. And even to parallel that even further, that they switched that over to Studio Mappa as well. So it's like they're also handing something else they really are known for with Vinland Saga over to Mappa as well. And it kind of makes me think like there's some kind of equal competitiveness going on between those two, that there are both excellent S tier studios. So you can't really subsidize a Wit Studio property with just any other studio. You have to send it to Mappa. So I think just again, we can't really talk about Mappa or Studio Wit. Man, I'm getting them confused in my head, but too much because I did want to talk about them for their 10-year anniversary this year, but that's in June and we're taking our break in June. But equally so, I want to see and ask you, Sam, do you have like a favorite Wit Studio property? Because there's so many that I can run through, but do you have like one offhand that you really love?
One offhand, no. I would say I remember I saw something recently that I didn't realize was Studio Wit, and if you would just remind me. Oh, I remember Vivi. Vivi was really good,
Mm-hmm.
and Spy Cross Family. Right now, that's Studio Wit as well. They're just co-animated with.
Yeah, I can run through the filmography real quick because it's not really short, but again, I'm pulling all the S tier ones out because they only
Mhm.
do S tier. So, of course, they started off with Attack on Titan. Then next came Seraph of the End, which is a really underrated shonen of this decade that we don't really
Mhm.
talk about much. There was Kabanari of the Iron Fortress. There's Ancient Magus Bride, the Vinland Saga, Great Pretender, Vivi from last year, as well as Ranking of Kings, and they're doing currently Spy X Family, which you don't pronounce the X, which kind of always blows my mind when it's like Hunter x Hunter or Hunter x Hunter.
Yeah.
And they're also doing the movie this year, Bubble. So for me personally, I
Yes.
just think
Okay.
they haven't really, well, not that they haven't outshadowed themselves with Kabanari of the Iron Fortress, but that's my pull for their best work.
So it's funny now. I understand why Kabanari Fortress is truly Attack on Trains because it's the same studio that did Attack on Titan. That's great, and I'm glad that you had mentioned Bubble because oddly enough, Bubble was the movie that I just saw yesterday, the night before, and I've mentioned but wanting to see it. And Bubble is great. It now I remember why it reminded me of Vivi so much because you remember when we watched Vivi, there were scenes where it would stop and it would focus on Vivi, juxtaposing her being an android to comparing her person to something else in the background, right? Like at she would they would animate her normally, then all of a sudden they would close up on her and you would sit and reflect it's like oh and remind yourself oh yeah this is an android. They did very, very similar in Bubble, and Bubble was beautifully animated. It was interesting that the story of Bubble it reminded me of Belle in the sense that with Belle, how it focused on the Beauty and the Beast as a motif. Bubble focuses on the Little Mermaid as a motif, and they are more on the nose with it as well in describing the original story for the Little Mermaid and the parallels that they make to the story. It's very it's well done in terms of artistry. In terms of like character, it was sort of hard for me to get, but it's hard for me to get lovey-dovey stuff anyways. But it's a really good watch, and people should give it a chance. So from what you've said, I would say like right now, Bubble is probably top right now for me. Top Studio Wit works.
Yeah, and it's really hard to kind of pick from your favorites because, again, I think something that people maybe not know is that this is a subsidiary of Production IG. Production IG is known for their choreography, so it feels like they
Hmm.
pulled all their best people and put them in their own studio and like said, "Oh, handle zombies on trains and handle a not what was Vinland Saga? Oh yeah, because Vinland Saga was like this terrible,
Vikings.
terribly well orchestrated Viking story that just leaves you heartbroken at the end of it. Same thing like with Vivi and Breaking the King. It's just like these heartstring moments that you just weren't expecting from this not no name company, but like something that really just like they're the company that or the studio that did Attack on Titan. And Attack on Titan is huge, but no one talks about the studio itself. So I'm glad that at least this 10-year anniversary, they're probably going to get their due justice with the exhibition being done in Tokyo. So people are probably going to know about Studio Wit from now on.
Awesome. Yeah, like you said, with all the work that they do, and even though they're not that short lived because I want to say Trigger. No, well, Trigger was Gynex before, so they still had a little bit more experience. But with being a fairly young studio and doing the amount of works that they do, they definitely will be on the rise in the coming years. So I can't wait for them to. I can't wait to see what else that they have in store. On to the next bit of news that we have. We have gotten some images and some news in regards to the opening for the new Kamen Rider W anime series known as Futo Pi. They had revealed the theme song artists, and as well as the debut date and some more key visuals. And in regards to the series is going to be following along a manga sequel project, which is for the Kamen Rider W franchise. And from what Toei has described the manga to be, it seems as though that the duo characters from W will be dealing with a mystery that's happening outside of the city they work in, which is different from the show, which is they are gumshoes dealing with mysteries that happen inside of the city. So it seems as though they're dealing a uh, with a criminal element that's trying to creep into their city. And as far as the debut dates, we have learned that the debut for the anime is going to be on August 1st, 2022. And Jay, I know. Well, what are your thoughts on this? If I remember, you not fairly. You don't have much experience with the Kamen Rider series. I know you might have gotten a little acquainted with it because of the Shin Heroes Japan project with Godzilla, Ultraman, and Evangelion.
Right, yeah, we reported on this last year because there was not much information dropped last year about it, but again, this is a celebration of its 50th anniversary of the creation of Kamen Rider. So the one thing that I took away from at least the information released this week was that Studio Kai is responsible for it, which wasn't reported last year, and there's probably a good reason for it because Studio Kai doesn't have many anime that it's produced solely. It's usually it usually functions as a in-between animation studio. It basically handles the transitional frames or the smear frames between animations. But yeah, it's really interesting that a studio is handling like this kind of unknown studio is handling like kind of an important anime series that's celebrating a 50th anniversary. So that's what I really took away from it. But I think since this will be my real first Kamen Rider series, I'm going to definitely be invested in it because the manga came out, I think, a couple of years ago in 2017, and then Kamen Rider W came out in 2009. So this, I think, is a nice way to introduce myself to the franchise, not properly, but at least in a way that say, oh, if this really hits it off in my mind, then I can definitely transition to the main story of it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
That's fairly interesting because I would have to say that the Kamen Rider W franchise, I would say that was my first Kamen Rider series as well. And you would if the anime or manga is anything like the live action series, I think you would definitely like the hijinks that happens and the slice of life tone that it takes. So hopefully it'll get you wrapped in. And looking at it as well, it seems as though the chief animation director, who is Yosuke Kabashima, is going to be directing the anime. And the reason why I bring his name up is because he is a segue to the next news story, because he is the character designer for Uma Musume Pretty Derby. And for this next bit of news anime, as I had mentioned to you before, Jay, it seems like I really nailed it with these news stories in terms of what's going on. Because with Uma Musume Pretty Derby, we follow these anthropomorphized half centaur people, these bipedal centaurs, where their goal is to become the best in a racing series or a racing event that's known as a Twinkle series. And this was an anime series that appeared in spring 2018. And there was a second season that was done by Studio Kai as well. that had aired last year in 2021. And this series is also known for having mobile video games that supplicate the franchise. And the reason why I say that this particular news story is in good connection is because it also turns out that this weekend is also the Kentucky Derby. So, for all of you Derby fans out there, I will do my best to have a mint julep with you later on this evening. But Jay, have you had a chance to look at the promotional material that they have for this new installment for the franchise?
Yeah, what a bizarre, what a bizarre series this is. Because again, when you look at like the breakdown of a yearly anime production, you have like certain anime that fall into a category of not, well, it falls into a category of niche, but then there's like this wider branching, I guess, umbrella category of like
Mm-hmm.
not furry bait, but it kind of falls into the same thing of brand new animal with Studio Trigger. Same thing with Beastars coming out in 2018. It's like it was such a weird year for people that love hybrid of animals and people together. So even weirdly so, it was done by PA Works, which is known for their pretty girl aesthetic. And I remember the promotional art for that first season because you see a girl running and then the camera pulls out and shows that she's a horse or a centaur. And it just made me laugh. And I think that's why it really got a second season approved because so many anime fans in the community were just memeing it to all kinds of popularity. And I'm kind of just amazed that we're 2 seasons in and getting like this promotional art and video game crossovers. And it's like, oh, this is going to stay in the consciousness for a while. But it's just amazing how things catch on and gain popularity.
No, like as you said, it's just very interesting, like what grabs on and what catches a hold of people. And as I said, like these are centaurs, but not in the traditional sense. So like they're bipedal. So in a sense, they're more lycanthropic. So you can probably humanize them a whole lot more than you would do a traditional centaur that you would see in, say, Harry Potter or anything else like that. And because it's as you mentioned earlier, they're dealing with pretty girls, right? Cute girls. Of course, you're going to start getting the people in the community who garner towards those characters. I would be interested to at least look in the first season to see if they do anything that's very similar to the Kentucky Derby because I have been on a Formula One binge kick recently, which with the Netflix docu series Formula One Race or Die, and I didn't realize just how obsessive or how involved one can get into that lifestyle of racing in terms of Formula One, just how much it takes over your life. And the only reason why I can compare it to the Kentucky Derby is because I saw just like a clip of it yesterday when I was at a patient's house. And the way that they were talking about things, where you go to get the horse set up, making sure that everything's done, they're brushed, that them and the jockeys are all well good and cleaned up and cued. Those are called the paddocks. The very same thing where the same name is used for when the cars are in their pit. It's like it's called a paddock where all the pits are at. So it just makes me think that how niche that derbies are. They probably have the same or similar mentality that the Formula One races or racers would have. So I gained a new appreciation for that, and I would be interested to see how much of that would translate in this anime. But enough about me rambling. We'll go on to a bit of news that is more catered to you, Jay. So we have learned that Made It in the Biz. Well, we haven't learned, but we have gained a new promotional video for Made It in the Abyss Anime Season 2. And we have also gotten some information in regards to more cast members as well as theme songs. Now, Jay, give us a moment to give us your thoughts on the series pushing forward.
Yeah, so I mentioned this in my 3x3 talking about how Made in Abyss is one of the defining, or at least one anime that defines my taste, because I love, and I think I've talked about this plenty of times, but I love the genre of putting children in danger kind of genre. And it doesn't really have a name for it or anything, but it's the idea of
AKA fuck them kids, right?
quote unquote, yes, with a comma there, but yeah, it is the category of like danger, but directed at kids and given their ability to overcome it. Like you see a little bit in at least the first season of Stranger Things. I mean, I guess it's in all seasons, but for one, there's the youngest at that point, but it doesn't really translate over to Western audiences really that well. I mean, you can like attribute it to Goonies, but those are like more adventure stories. Same thing as like most recently like the Harry Potter series. Again, just kids overcoming like weird things, but to the extreme of Made in Abyss, it's a Dark Souls world, and it's a 12-year-old girl and boy transversing that world, and it's layered in a sense of like stacking it on top of a skyscraper, kind of in layers, going down, descending into a abyss essentially. And it's such a weird series because one, it started back in 2017 by Studio Cinema Citrus. They're the ones that also do Shield Hero. And then since then, there's been like 3 movies, which were Journey's Dawn, Wandering Twilight, and Dawn of the Deep Soul, which is weird to have 3 movies between a season 1 and season 2. So one of them is
are those movies canon or are they filler?
2 of them are the compilations, and then one of them is a filler, I guess technically. Well, it's canon, but it does contribute to the world building that will happen in season 2. So I guess it serves as a function or a prequel for season 2. But it's such a weird series because it's hard to think of other series. I guess Promise Neverland is another horrific kind of treatment of children that kind of resonates with people. Higurashi, the more recent reboot of it, also falls into that. But it's such a weird genre that it comes up so frequently, but so inconsistently as well, that I love it so much. So I'm glad that it's getting a season 2, or I mean, the season 2 has been in works for a while, but same studio, same people working on it. Kevin Penkin, the composer that also did Tower of God, is coming back. So everyone's coming back. They're coming back for it, but yeah, but the cast is solid, theme songs are solid, and the character reveals are solid because it's continuing the story from where it left off in season 1. So I'm super hyped for it.
That's great. And I'm trying to think. Did you read the rest of the manga to see where the story is, or are you just following the anime like I am?
Yeah, so it is a continuing series that started back in 2012, but I did not dive into the manga because the mangaka, I don't want to mess up his name, but his last name is definitely Akihito, and
Akihito? Okay.
so he does these very detailed illustrations of the world, and I kind of want to leave the world itself a secret because in the same vein as Dark Souls world, you kind of want to experience it in the medium that's best in. And I think if I see a map of what the abyss looks like, then I'm going to be like, oh, okay, that kind of ruins the surprise. But yeah, I want to experience it as the characters experience it.
Awesome. No, and I would say that with that type of story, it's when you can tell that the world building is done fairly well when you can experience it as the characters are experiencing it in a natural way. Very much like with One Piece, how the characters, they're not dumb, but they're experiencing the world and you're experiencing the world with them and the world continues to grow. So you get a similar feeling like that in Made in the Abyss, and as you mentioned before, with the way that the background environments are done, it's very Ghibli-esque in how they give so much attention to detail to the backgrounds. And I also like the supporting cast. I can't remember her name, but it's the one. I think she was I can't remember the color whistle that she had, but it was the one chick that had the super strength, and whenever she fought, she hunched over and she just looked like this behemoth. I really liked her character. It was very interesting and it was very nuanced. So the characters that are written, they're done very well. And even though it's a huge cast, the way that they split up the time, you can sit and you can ruminate on each individual one. And as the article had mentioned, the second season will be premiering this year in July 2022. And a little bit more of a segue, because this franchise, or at least the manga, is being published in English by Seven Seas Production or Seven Seas Entertainment. And we also had another news stories about Seven Seas getting, I think, about 3 or 4 more manga franchises that's going to be published here in the States. But I think that's enough news for us to sort of transition into Humanity Has Declined, because there is a story in the anime that has to deal with manga and conventions itself. Now, time codes, descriptions. I forgot to mention it earlier about the news, but we're mentioning it now as we're about to go into the anime review for today's work. Unless, Jay, if you have anything else to say about Made in the Abyss.
Oh no, I'm good talking about how humanity is going extinct.
All right. So, as we said, we will be going to the anime of today's topic. And Jay, this was your anime. So, why don't you tell us a little bit on how you were acquainted with this anime and give us a little bit of background on it?
Of course, because it's such an odd thing coming or being in the anime community and not knowing how much anime there is to watch, and knowing that you will experience things outside of the animes itself. Again, because meme culture is kind of just pervasive anywhere you go, no matter the community you're in. But the meme that came out of this anime is called bread gore, and it's something it's something that you see not frequently anymore, but back in 2012 when this premiered, Red Gore was just everywhere, and it has like resurfaced a couple times since then. But it is a meme of a robotic piece of bread, uh, talking about eating me, or trying to explain to a girl that they should eat me, like end my existence because existence is pain. And
It's so funny that you say that. There was a video online or on YouTube. This one animator that I follow, ASDF works. He has one where you follow this muffin and he's suicidal and he's like, "Eat me, it's muffin time," that sort of thing. I want to go back and see when that first came out, because I want to see if, like you said, mentioned the bread scene, if that was what the influence was for the muffin.
right, yeah. So it's a piece of toast or loaf of bread that says like "kill me, eat me, I'm here to be eaten," and it feels like these vibes of Sausage Party, which I don't know if Seth Rogen wrote, but he definitely voiced him. But yeah, it
Yeah.
has this weird kind of trend of weird horror in anime, because I don't know how I feel about this anime being labeled a horror, but it's definitely dark comedy. It's definitely post-apocalyptic. But with the anime as it is, it was animated by Studio I. Actually, I don't even know how to pronounce the studio's name, because it's AIC and then ASTA, and they're all uppercased, or capitalized with periods between them. So I don't know what the stands for. But
Ake Asta. I don't know. I'm calling it Ake Asta.
yeah, Egg Asta. Okay. But yeah, it's such a weird studio. And it's actually the first studio that we'll talk about that is actually no longer in existence. That they started
Oh,
back
really?
in, 2000, or not 2000, but 1982, and ended really in 2013 because they transitioned, or their main production team left to form their own company, which turned into Studio Troika, which what did Troika do? Troika did Recreators, and that was
Oh,
their
okay.
first production in 2013. But yeah, you also know this studio because you talk about this anime a bunch, but they're also responsible for Blue Gender. And
Okay, yeah.
something else they're responsible for was Now, Then, Here, and There, which is a really other dark fantasy story, and I guess they're most known for Orimo. It's the weird, incestuous kind of anime. Orimo. Yeah. So, very weird studio for a studio that we're talking about that just kind of just disappeared, I guess, after 30 years. Because they started off with Tenchi Universe, so that's probably the first time we saw their work before. But yeah, this series, Humanity Has Declined, is based off a light novel that ran from 2007 to 2016, had 9 volumes and 2 specials that was later adapted into 3 manga series. So for the series as it is, I watched it off of High Dive. Where did you watch it, Sam?
Let's say High Dive as well.
Okay, High Dive as well. Cool. Yeah, so 12 episodes in total, premiered on July 2nd, 2012. And we only watched 3 episodes because we give it a 3-episode test. And this definitely falls into the category of anime that I like and not sure if I can recommend. But the core premise of it is that a nameless girl basically acts as a UN ambassador between the declining human population as well as fairies, between fairies and the human population. And these fairies are basically this very prominent, very multiplicitous, I guess is the word, multiplicitous species on Earth. And she basically has to deal with their mischievous powers and the mysteries that kind of revolve around the relationship between humans and fairies. So based off of that premise alone, I'm like, I wonder where this is going to go, because it goes places I was not expecting. So, Sam, how about you? Have you heard about this anime before or experienced it? And where do you want to take this conversation? Because there's a lot to talk about.
I would say, like, I might have vaguely remembered the bread gore or things about food committing suicide or wanting to be eaten. So it's interesting that this came up, and I would say, like, I was not expecting that at all. At least, like, for the blood spray that was the bread, I expected it to be jam. It was like, oh, it's carrot juice for kids who don't like to eat carrots. Okay, that's how you make kids eat carrots, by having their bread basically tear their heads off in front of them. I would say the comedy is very, very well done. And the main character, if you remember from I'm a Spider, So What, the main character in this franchise reminds me a lot of Kumo-san, which that's my pen name for the main character in I'm a Spider, So What. Basically, because she's a spider, so I call her Kumo-san. I would say they're very similar in the sense that they're introspective and they have a lot of inner dialogue. However, whenever they talk to other people, they're very introverted, they're very quiet. And whenever the person says something, you can definitely feel the main character's true disposition in her inner dialogue. And I would say in Kumo-san, in I'm a Spider, So What, it was more natural because with her, she was very isolated. We got to get a good sense of her character before we get to see her interact with actual people. With this other character, it was sort of hard to pick up because we're basically seeing her in the middle of a story. Her hair was cut. We don't know why her hair was cut. She seems embarrassed whenever people are looking at her. And then we get to see her go through hijinks, and we get to learn a little bit later on why her hair was cut, things like that. So there's a little bit of work on the viewer's perspective. Now I'm just talking about the anime instead of just giving you my thoughts and like my exposure to it. But I'm fairly open to whatever direction you want to take this, Jay, because it's, as you said, it's a very interesting work, and it takes a certain type of person to enjoy this series fully.
Exactly. So again, why I'm kind of, well, just to say right at the start of this is like I'm very much on the fence about to recommend this or to rebury it. So let's just talk about some of the good parts and bad parts of it. But yeah. Oh, and also to clarify is that the main heroine or main character does have a name. Her name is technically Watashi, which Sam, I know you know Japanese, so do you want to translate
Yeah,
what Watashi means?
Watashi just means me. It's
Yeah,
so like
exactly.
yeah, it's sort of surreal and weird because I don't know if she's supposed to be the viewer's self-insert there, or maybe it's just a play on words because anime they do that a whole lot. Like for instance, Sanji, San means three, and Sanji is the third born of his family. So I don't know if it's a pun along those lines or if it's supposed to be something deeper.
Yeah, so I'm gonna side on the deeper part because this very much gave me Penguin Drum vibes because it feels like so much intentionality is done into small things that probably are going to go over a lot of people's head. And I think you have to kind of be really pretentious to enjoy this anime because one,
Yes.
the main characters are basically given names based off of their positions. So Watashi, meaning I or me, that's the main heroine's name. She's also coupled with a filmographer, I guess, is his role because all he does is video record what she's doing in the world that they interact with. So, and his name is just Assistant. And then she
Well,
has.
to be fair, we only hear her call him assistant. We don't hear anybody else call him anything else. So she's probably just calling him by his title. We don't know if she knows his real name.
Right. So I think that's part of what the show is going for is that this very
Hmm.
sense of see now I'm going to start writing an academic paper on this anime, but yeah, the sense of tribalism because names are basically derived from the role that you have. So like even if you go back to like Anglo-Saxon names like Baker and Smith, they're all based on the job that you did at the
That you
time. So
had.
even
Hmm.
grandfather, she only calls him grandfather, not by his name. So no one gets referred to by their names in the show, or at least in the first 3 episodes. It's just assistants, Watashi, and grandfather. But
No, I was just gonna say I don't remember the the co-worker from the UN that comes in with the manga stuff in the third episode. I can't remember if she was actually given an actual name.
right, because in the third episode, is that third episode when she introduced? Yeah,
That
but yeah,
that's the
her
third
name
episode.
is Y, and I
Oh
don't know.
yes, yes, yes. It's just a letter. So
Yeah, which kind of for the direction that that character goes, she goes into this obsession with creating yaoi or boys love manga. So I was thinking like, why is
that's
yaoi?
why
Stands for yaoi, but she's also
that
called
makes sense.
Silver, but her hair is silver. So it's
Hmm.
like people in this world for how far humanity has declined kind of have reversed back to this tribalism of just naming people off of their basic characteristics or features or how they look. So I was like, oh, okay, that's what they're going for. But, that might just be me looking too deeply into it. But it is a weird structure that happens for these first 3 episodes because they do feel to be operating in pairs. So it is a total of 12 episodes. So, like, the first and the second episode work together, and the third
Hmm.
episode is left on a cliffhanger where to talk about manga creation. So we go into a little bit of shop talk for what the anime has to say about manga creation, but the sense of competitiveness where Y finds a yaoi manga and starts producing yaoi, and it becomes this giant sensation because who could think about this genre to exist still? It's like the reemergence of art, and I was like, oh my gosh! After society's collapse, other cultures discovered art and then reproduced it, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And then the fairies commercialize it to make it competitive. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a commentary on how marketplace and we're like going down this deep wormhole of like, what does it mean? What does this all mean?
Yeah.
But it's very enjoyable on the surface level, like you said, because one, the humor is done very well because it's such dry humor to absurdity. So we haven't even talked about the fairies yet, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much about this, but
Oh no, no, no! Because as you said, like you really enjoyed this work, and I wanted to hear your take on it.
so just kind of parallel, so you can start talking about it, Sam. But did you find the fairies very sinister?
It's funny, like as it's funny that you say that because as I'm watching it, and when the fairies pop up, I just had that flashback because you and I, we were watching Loki at the same time, and I'm like, Jay's going to say something about these fairies, much like how he said something about Lady Time, right? The chick with the clock face, with the clock face as a face,
Oh,
because
Miss
you had mentioned
Minutes.
that Miss Minutes, yes, because you mentioned how she was very sinister, and I would say like in terms of how sinister that they can be, mainly because I guess they seem jaded in a sense that they are well aware that humanity is slowly declining, and it seems like they're just bored and they're enjoying mankind or humanity before it goes away. And even though Watashi has some control over them, basically puts them in a bookshelf type thing where they can go to sleep, things like that. It seems like they're just playing along with her and like letting her act like she has control over them. But that's the only thing that I can think of in terms of sinister. And I'm not entirely sure, like that's one thing I was confused on in regards to work in like what exactly their relationship to the fairies are, like why their the relationship with humans need to be monitored, why, like what her position actually entails, because we see them go to a factory where things are being made and things are being where things are being manufactured at a basically using nothing, right, to make meat and stuff like that. And the thing that her and her grandfather make a big stink about is the UN, whatever that stands for in that society, the government that they work for, basically wants to make sure that fairies aren't involved. But it's sort of weird because they don't use money to purchase anything. Even with the comics, everything's basically given away for free, but they're worried about goods and produce being introduced to their quote unquote market, I guess free market in a literal sense, and worry what that's going to do to people. And even the fact that the fairies work quote unquote for the humans for sweets, it doesn't really make sense, because if the fairies can basically do whatever they want and make things however they want to, they can make sweets whatever whenever they feel like it. Why are they dependent on humans and what they make to be sweet? So I guess like when I start thinking about stuff like that, it doesn't really make sense, and maybe that's not the point, and that's one thing that's frustrating to me. But I just have to not focus on those. But and just going back to the term or the things that are very funny about it. So we see even in the beginning how they were saying how food is scarce and they have to do what they can to survive. So in the beginning we see the male villagers, they're going out to hunt, and they basically tell Watashi and the other uh, girls who are still at the village that they have to dress down and prepare chicken to cook. And they get too scared killing the chickens and end up having the chickens escape. And then 5 minutes later, they run into wild, skinned, and decapitated chickens with the. I don't know if it is a logo that is specific to the fairies, but the logo has a fairy logo on it. I guess very much like what you said earlier, Jay, penguin drum. So I guess like that's when you can start getting a sense of sinisterness, right? And it's funny because these skin chickens are sentient, and we have a scene where she, being Watashi, is playing around with these universal translator glasses that can translate your thoughts so that and communicate it to others, and you can and she basically sees subtitles for what they're saying, and the glasses translate everything literally. So anything like curse words, or I would say metaphors, it would be lost upon you just because of the way that things are translated, and it's just hilarious what goes on there. And I hope that those glasses come back again, but they seem like they're just like thrown out the window after they're introduced, because it seems like a very fun thing. But yeah, so like those are my thoughts so far on it. Jay, do you have any other any other thoughts or closing remarks you would like to make before we give our verdict on Resurrect or Rebury?
Oh, so much. But yeah, I think the sinisterness I was talking about before, and I thought you were going to talk about, but the character design for the fairies is they're always smiling. And I don't know why that's so sinister to me. I think it's the same thing as with Miss Minutes and Loki, is that things that are too childish or too, I don't know what, appealing, frighten people. So the same thing about why Five Nights at Freddy is so terrifying is because the killers are animatronic children toys or animatronic for children. So when you see something that is, I don't know, too childish or something that's like, even going into like the Saw puppet in the Saw series, it's like one of his motifs is to use a puppet. And like puppets are scary. Clowns are scary as soon as you put a twist on it. So that's the sinisterness I was kind of talking about and leading into. And it's the thing of how they present the fairies as being, yes, they can be manipulated by Watashi by like very small, like psychological manipulations, but they're incredibly smart. They're incredibly powerful. What they can do is really not seen, because even in the second episode where the chickens are running the factory, sorry.
Yes.
That just made me laugh. And like they're keeping the fairies hostage because they're like a not infinite source of creation, but it feels like that. So like they don't do too much, explaining of like the magic system or how things are worked, because one, something that a lot of critics have pointed out about the series is that the episodes are actually out of order technically, like chronologically, is that
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, because some things will happen or things will be referred to that haven't happened yet or have happened yet, but it won't happen later in the series. So I think it's very much a series that needs to be redone, because there are 9 light novel volumes. The manga only had 5 volumes, so it's like 5 volumes barely gets you 12 episodes. So it does definitely feel like something that needs to be revisited, readapted. But again, I don't know if I can really recommend it or resurrect it. So I think the best praise that I can give it is that the chaoticness of the humor in it feels very much like Pop Team Epic. I don't know if you ever checked that out from a few years ago, but we also covered Tatami Galaxy on the podcast, and even Space Dandy, which is another series I very much vibe with. Oh, I can even extend it to Adventure Time, how they kind of tackle the post-apocalyptic dry humor of things. Because yes, Watashi has a great personality, what you mentioned, because she's snarky, sarcastic, very apathetic to response. And I think that's what happens when you have to deal with like godlike creatures on a daily basis. And I very much enjoy that aesthetic. Same thing with the relationship between her and the assistant, which he doesn't talk at all. So I like the mute kind of.
Oh, I love the comparison that she made, because he has a scene where he does a joke, right? And his joke is really dark, and he causes. He was trying to make the fairy laugh so that he can do stuff, but he ends up making the fairy depressed, and he runs into her pocket to deal with his depression, and she makes the fact that the assistant lives a very simple life. Why is he so depressed? And it reminds me, I think I had sent it to you earlier this week, where it was a comparison between Hayao Miyazaki and Ito, where Hayao Miyazaki, all of his works are very vibrant, colorful, and full of life, but his personality is very grim and dark, and how Ito is the complete opposite. He has a demeanor that's very positive and very warming, but his works are very dark and disturbing. And like that duality was sort of reminded me with that assistant.
Yeah, it's very like it's such a chaotic neutral kind of relationship that I feel like they're siblings. I don't know if that's supposed to be the vibe that they're sending, but yeah, she's apathetic to dealing with gods, and he's kind of like there amusing himself, but he's amusing himself in the
Yeah.
way of like, oh, I need to find a way to keep myself alive kind of depression. And I just think it's so funny that they made him mute as well, so he has to relay everything either through physical comedy or for environmental play. So to wrap things up and give it final thoughts before I gush more about this, and I didn't even get to talk about the Yaoi episode because it's so weird what they talk about resonates with what we talked about in the Bakuman episode about the creation of manga and the kind of time restraints as well as the fandom that can blow up about work and authorship of things and commercialism of art.
The thing that I love about it too, right? Their distribution. So because like everything is free, right? So it's essentially everybody is working for the sake of the community, right? The sake of the whole. And in the beginning with the distribution, they're saying, "Hey, we have these works that would help people, like relax, things like that, during their downtime, and it will help boost morale." And like they start getting so popular, and the books have started becoming thicker and heavier. The distribution is like, "Hey, we understand what you're doing, but you have so much stuff that we don't have enough room for supplies, so you're going to have to figure out some other way to do it." And that's how they came up with the idea for conventions, having the consumer go to them. And I would say that was pretty clever in how to bring conventions into their world.
Exactly, because it seems to be like talking about how technology is basically reinvented, like things we're familiar with, like
Yeah.
how do they disappear over time? Because I guess talking a little bit more about Moon Knight, like we really have no idea how the pyramids were built. Like we have best guess estimates, and people have been researching it for years, but like the exact technology, how it's done is like still a mystery, and it's like, oh, it must have been aliens, kind of people on the History Channel have talked about. But yeah, I
Yes.
very much enjoyed that Yaoi episode for talking about a very like restrictive subject matter, like to make it yaoi for some reason. Like they literally could have made it shonen or shoujo or seinen, like for that particular reason. It's like weird because it's not a Bishoujo anime. It's just like it was such sorry, it's just such a weird topic to introduce. And then at the end of that episode, they get the elves. Sorry, not elves. They're not elves. That's racist. They're fairies. They're fairies.
Yes.
Trap them inside of a manga, and I'm assuming the fourth episode is about them getting out and how they're supposed to do that. But to wrap around to the question that we always ask, and you can give me your final thoughts, Sam, but to resurrect her, to reburied it, I really, really enjoy it, and I'm definitely going to watch the rest of the season. But I am going to say that, oh wow. Okay, actually, Sam, can you actually tell me how you feel? Because I think for the one time I want to hear you before I make my decision.
So I'm not gonna lie, I was sort of on the fence. In the beginning, it felt very slice of lifey, like the first two episodes. It seemed fairly linear. As I said, like we started out with her in the middle of the story. I'm like, okay, cool, that's not that bad. We, you're able to pick it up, and even though like it wasn't necessarily my bag, it seemed like it was fairly digestible. Again, like very slice of lifey. So I was comparing it to working, and whether or not I would give it to somebody else in that regard. And even in the third episode, the way they present it, it's as though like time is still moving forward, but like it gives you enough backstory to realize that this is that these are things happening in the past. And but I can see moving forward how you would feel like things are out of order, like with what happened with Peach Boy Riverside. How if you watched it on one service, everything is in chronological order, but if you watched it on a different service, everything is out of order, and you would have to do your due diligence to figure out the story that way. Comedy is good. it's not necessarily my bag if it's as chaotic as I'm trying to remember what's the name of the franchise that you keep comparing it to, Jay. You said like 50. Oh, if it's as chaotic as Penguin Drum, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but if it has the same storytelling as the first two episodes just throughout the series, then I would recommend it to somebody. I mean, you can also say that the intro is very good, but the intro is very chaotic. But if the show is anything like the intro, where it's just cutesy and just very chaotic, things are all over the place, then I would rebury it. So from what I've seen, I couldn't really justify it as a good slice of life anime that's as good or better than working. So I would have to say it is reburied, even though I can see the appeal and how people can enjoy it. The comedy is very, very good. It's just very unconventional, and I don't know how many people would be able to grab a hold onto it.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. And I think I'm going to side on the same thing. I guess it really helps to hear the other person's opinion. So I'm glad that you do that whenever you're on the other side of it. But yeah, it's definitely a case of something I enjoy, but something I can't recommend. And there's like small things about it that, are positives, like overly like positive. So like the character design artist is the same one that does Stein Gates and ReZero. I don't want to mess up her name, but it's Kyoto. Oh no, it's not Kyoto. It's Kyota Sakai, and she later does like the character design work of a lot of animes, but she's most known for ReZero and Steins Gate. So, and you kind of see that in the Watashi's designs, like her eyes are like kind of, I don't know how you would describe them. You don't see the pupils; they're like shaded orbs. I don't really know how to put it into words, but the character design, I think you talked about the attention to detail they put into the background art is very high, and it's very artistically, I guess, stylized, because it very much reminds me of the movie, like the Firefly movie, Fireflies in the Forest, or Forest of the Fireflies. But yeah, small things. The humor is definitely a particular sort, being dry to the point of like absurdity. So I guess it's not everyone's.
One other thing, before I forget. So like at the end of the first episode, one thing that reminded me of a contemporary work that I just saw recently, Centaur World, where basically this horse is isekai'd into this world of centaurs, and chaos ensues. The horse ends up becoming more magical along the way. And at the end of the series, her tail gains sentience and starts talking, right? And I would say that with Watashi, as I mentioned earlier, stuff happened with her hair. And then she finds a tonic that helps her hair grow back. And then her hair grows sentience. And she basically gains Medusa like power, Medusa from the Inhumans. And I'm not going to lie, had they kept going with her with the Medusa hair powers in the next episode, I probably would have kept watching it. But because we jumped around in time, I like the shoujo energy. I'm sorry, the shonen energy wasn't there enough for me to keep going. So
right, yeah. So again, I think that's the major downside, that it feels very out of order, and don't know how pervasive that is. Is like terribly out of order. It's like this the season 1 finale is like episode 5 or whatever. And then you're just left like wondering like, how do we get back to this point? But yeah, again, the positives, like the dry humor, I think is a positive. It's my kind of humor. I think it has a lot of on its mind, being like metaphors and like parallels to our real world, and it's like, oh yeah, this is how society develops, or this is how a basically extinct human race would kind of thrive, or at least try to maintain its existence, and not just like everyone decide, oh, let's just die out kind of thing. And even the reemergence of technology and trends and memes that perpetuate throughout history is kind of like, oh, it's endearing. Maybe like 500 years from now, someone's going to find a yaoi CD and resurrect that kind of genre that just died out sometime earlier.
One other positive. it seems like they do focus on female characters a lot. Even though like Granddad and Assistant, they're both male characters, they, because of Watashi and the people that she works with, like we see her work with other females, and we see other female characters in the village that are taking care of their families, things like that. Even with the yaoi resurgence, we see nothing but females going around. It's funny because during the convention, we see somebody asking Granddad, is like, "Hey, what's that outside?" And he's like, "Oh, just girls doing girl things." And like it was, I would say, like, it was somewhat refreshing that women were given such a highlight so much, but I guess like because of like the subject material, I don't know, like they didn't get into like how dirty the yaoi was, but I guess the fact that they had women just celebrating something that they liked at the same time, it was somewhat refreshing.
Yeah, so overall, I think I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
side with you, Sam, that it's a reburied as well. It's something that I like and something that I definitely will finish on my own personal time, add it to my seasonal watch. But it's something that I don't feel everyone, or at least even the minimum audience that I would recommend anime to, would check out, especially if I'm giving them the positives versus the negatives. So it's a double reburied from both of us.
Yes, that it is, and this was a wild ride, but it wasn't not enjoyable. I need to learn how to say that better. It was fairly enjoyable, even for as chaotic as it was, Jay. And for just a bit of a heads up on what our next anime will be, we will be following another pick from Jay where we look far away into the past of 1973, where we're dealing with robots and more cute girls in the series known as Move Love Total Eclipse. Now, Jay, with that being said, what have you got for us today?
All right, so I want to close with one of my favorite fairies in all of fiction. So these are the Tooth Fairies from Hellboy, and their description goes as such. The Tooth Fairies hail from the Black Forest in Germany. They feed largely on calcium, aka bones, flesh, organs, and other tissues, and due to its high concentrations of that mineral, they prefer the teeth, hence their name. When attacking live prey, they target a victim's teeth, though they will eat their prey until nothing remains but droppings. They swarm in large numbers and capable of overwhelming a humanoid target, stripping them of flesh in seconds. Despite their savage behavior, they are sentient and capable of communication, though not in human languages.
Damn, talk about grim fairy tales.